Please don't cry, buddy. Daddy's trying, okay? Preston Kade knelt in front of his son, brushing a tear off the 5-year-old's cheek as they sat in the waiting room of the free community clinic in Midtown. Nolan's asthma had kicked in hard this morning. Preston had scraped together just enough cash for the cab ride here, but the medication? That was another story. Across from them sat a woman in a navy wrap dress, her dark curls pinned back neatly, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. She looked like she belonged somewhere with champagne and chandeliers not here, next to flickering fluorescent lights and a chipped vending machine. But she hadn't moved her eyes from Nolan since they walked in. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. He's adorable. What's his name? Preston hesitated. Nolan. He looks brave, she said, offering the boy a warm smile. How old?
5.
Almost 6. Preston ran a hand through his messy hair. So, full of opinions. That made her laugh. It was light, genuine. I bet. She took off her sunglasses. Preston blinked. The woman had the kind of presence that could stop traffic, hazel eyes, sharp cheekbones, and this calm elegance, like she was made of something expensive. I'm Talia Brooks, she said, reaching out a hand. Preston shook it. Preston Kade. She tilted her head.
Kade.
That's a strong name. He smiled, a little embarrassed. Sounds stronger than my bank account. Talia watched him.
Carefully.
You're a single dad?
Yeah.
He glanced down at Nolan, who was now distracted by a sticker on the floor. His mom she left when he was 2. Couldn't handle the responsibility, I guess. I'm sorry, she said. Preston shrugged. It's okay. I'd rather do it alone than have someone around who doesn't care. He didn't expect her to say anything back. Most people just nodded and changed the subject. But she surprised him. I was raised by a single dad, she said. He gave up everything for me. Preston looked up. Really? She nodded. He worked nights, drove a delivery truck, slept 4 hours a day, but never missed a parent-teacher meeting. Preston smiled. Sounds like someone I'd get along with. There was a silence that wasn't awkward, just comfortable. Nolan tugged on Preston's sleeve.
Daddy, I'm hungry.
Preston's jaw tightened. We'll eat after, bud. Promise. Talia stood. I'll grab something from the vending machine. Preston started to protest, but she waved him off.
Please.
I insist. She returned a minute later with a bag of pretzels and a juice box. Nolan took them with a shy thank you and immediately curled into Preston's side to snack. You didn't have to do that, Preston said quietly. I wanted to. The nurse called Talia's name. She stood but hesitated. Will you still be here when I'm out? Preston chuckled. Unless we win the lottery in the next 20 minutes, yeah. She smiled slow, warm, real. Good. When she disappeared through the door, Preston looked down at Nolan. What do you think, buddy? She seems nice. Nolan grinned through a mouthful of pretzels. She's pretty. Yeah, Preston muttered. She really is. Talia sat on the exam table, heart racing. She hadn't planned to come to this clinic. Her usual private doctor was across town, in a marble building with valet parking and espresso in the lobby. But this morning she'd needed something different. Somewhere real. Somewhere she didn't feel like everything around her was just numbers and contracts. She hadn't expected to meet a man like Preston. The way he held his son. The way he didn't complain, didn't ask for help, just quietly did everything he could. He was nothing like the men she knew, polished heirs who wore designer watches and saw fatherhood as a mild inconvenience. Preston was the kind of man who made your heart hurt in the best way. She was in trouble. When she came back out, Preston stood up quickly. Nolan was asleep on the chair, his head heavy against his dad's shoulder. How'd it go? He asked.
Fine.
Just a quick checkup. He nodded. We're still waiting. They're backed up today. She glanced at the sleeping boy. Does he have a doctor? He used to. Lost our insurance after I got laid off last year. Now we come here when it gets bad. Something twisted in her chest. What do you do? Construction.
Or did.
Projects dried up lately. Have you ever thought about restoring homes? She asked suddenly. He blinked. Restoring? Old properties. Making them livable again. Sure, I've done a few. Why? She hesitated. I might know someone looking for help. He frowned. You some kind of real estate agent? Talia smiled. Something like that. Before he could ask more, the nurse called his name. I'll be back, he said, gently lifting Nolan. It was really nice talking to you, Talia. You too, Preston. She watched them disappear through the door, her heart pulling in a way she hadn't felt in years. Outside, nearly an hour later, Preston stepped into the cold air with Nolan in his arms and found Talia waiting beside a sleek black car. You're still here? He asked, surprised. You said you'd be out soon. He looked stunned. You didn't have to wait. I wanted to. She looked down at Nolan. Is he okay?
Yeah.
Tight chest, but the meds should kick in. She hesitated. Can I drive you home? Preston hesitated. You don't even know where we live. Tell me. He narrowed his eyes. Why are you being so nice to us? She met his gaze. Because you deserve it. He studied her for a long beat, then nodded. Okay. Talia opened the door, and Preston slid in with Nolan still curled against him. Inside, the seats were buttery leather, the kind that screamed money. Wow, he muttered. This is not a cab. She laughed.
No.
It's not. As the car pulled away from the curb, Talia looked over at him, heart thudding. She was falling for him, and he had no idea who she really was. Preston watched the city blur past the car window, Nolan's weight warm against his chest. The interior was whisper quiet, the kind of silence you only got in luxury vehicles. Talia didn't say much during the ride, but her eyes kept flicking his way, like she was memorizing details she didn't want to forget. When the car turned onto a street, the contrast was jarring. The cracked pavement, the leaning fences, the rusted mailbox hanging by one screw. It was a far cry from wherever Talia usually parked this sleek, silent machine. You sure you want to stop here? Preston asked as they rolled to a halt in front of his building. I'm sure. He shifted Nolan gently, who stirred but didn't wake. Thanks for the ride. Talia opened her door. Let me help. You what?
No.
You don't have to get out. She was already circling the car. I want to. Preston pushed open the building's front door with his shoulder while she held it for him. Inside, the hallways smelled faintly of old paint and yesterday's dinner from somewhere down the hall. The overhead light buzzed but didn't flicker. Third floor, he said, nodding toward the stairs. Elevator's been out for about 2 years. She didn't hesitate. Let's go. He unlocked the apartment door and nudged it open with his foot. The place was small, 2 rooms and a kitchen nook, but clean.
Lived in.
Nolan's toy fire truck sat on the floor near the couch, and a drawing of a tree with a bright red sun hung crookedly on the fridge. Talia stepped inside, taking it all in without a trace of judgment. This is nice. Preston huffed out a laugh. You're being generous. No, I'm being honest. He laid Nolan on the couch, pulling a faded blanket over him. The boy turned on his side, mumbling something about pancakes. Does he always talk in his sleep? Talia asked, lowering her voice. Only when he's had a rough day, Preston said, rubbing the back of his neck. Which, lately, has been too many. She looked around again. You did all this yourself? The shelves, the tile.
Yeah.
Picked up materials from salvage yards. Took a while. You have a good eye, she said, studying the shelves. You ever consider design? He raised an eyebrow. Design. Interior. Architectural, something where your instincts matter. I don't have a degree, he said. Neither did my father, she replied, walking to the window. But he had grit. That counts for more. You talk about him like he's still around. He's not, she said, her tone even. But I remember everything. Preston didn't ask for more. The quiet between them stretched out again. Not awkward, just waited. She turned from the window. Do you have time tomorrow? For what? I meant what I said earlier. I know someone who needs restoration work. I'd like to bring you by. He leaned against the counter. You don't seem like someone who does favors for strangers. I'm not, she said plainly. But I don't think of you as a stranger. You still don't know much about me. I know enough. He crossed his arms. You're not telling me everything. I will, she said. But not all at once. There was something in her eyes, guarded, yet open. She wasn't used to letting people in, and yet here she was, standing in his kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. He nodded slowly. All right. I'll come with you. She smiled, not the practiced kind, but something smaller, quieter. Good. She pulled a pen from her bag and scribbled an address on a receipt from his counter. Meet me here at 8 tomorrow morning. He glanced at it. That's across town. I'll send a car. I can take the train. She met his gaze. Let me do this my way. There was no point arguing. Not with someone like her. He folded the receipt and slid it into his back pocket. Don't be late, she added, already heading for the door. I won't, he said. And Talia? She paused, hand on the knob. Thanks. For today. Her eyes softened. You're welcome, Preston. After she left, he stood there for a while, the apartment too quiet except for Nolan's light breathing. Something about her had rattled loose a part of him he thought had gone dormant. Hope. The next morning, Preston was waiting outside the building by 7:45, hair combed and shirt tucked in. Nolan was at the neighbors for a few hours, bribed with the promise of cartoons and leftover Halloween candy. At exactly 8, a silver car pulled up. Not the same one from yesterday, this one was even sleeker. The driver stepped out and opened the door without a word. Talia wasn't inside. Instead, a man in a tailored charcoal coat and thin-framed glasses gave him a polite nod. Mr. Kade. I'm Nathan. Miss Brooks asked me to escort you to the site. Preston slid in, trying not to feel out of place. The car glided through the city, heading toward a part of town he rarely saw up close. When they turned into a gated drive lined with ivy-covered walls and stone statues, he leaned forward. This is where the job is? Nathan didn't answer. The car came to a stop in front of a sprawling estate. 3 stories, pale stone, massive windows. A fountain bubbled in the center of a circular drive. Preston stepped out, stunned. This place needs restoring? She'll explain, Nathan said, already ringing the bell. The door swung open to reveal Talia. Today, she wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled into a low twist. She looked almost casual, except casual people didn't answer doors to mansions before breakfast. Preston blinked. You live here? She stepped aside.
Come in.
He followed her through a marble foyer into a sunlit room with high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden.
This
is yours. Yes. He turned slowly. You said you knew someone who needed help. I do, she said quietly. Me. He stared at her, trying to make sense of everything. Why didn't you tell me yesterday? Because I wanted you to see me before you saw all this. He took a step back. So, what, this was a test? No, she said, her expression tightening. It was a beginning. He looked around again. You're wealthy. Yes. Like, really wealthy. She nodded once. He let out a low breath. And you still waited in that clinic? I needed to remember, she said. And then I met you. He ran a hand over his face. This is a lot. I know. He met her eyes. You didn't lie. But you didn't tell the truth either. I'll tell you everything now, she said. But only if you stay. He didn't move. I'm not asking you to change, she added. I just want to show you who I really am. He looked at her for a long moment, then finally walked toward the window, staring out. You're lucky I'm used to surprises, he said over his shoulder. She let out a breath. So you'll stay.
For now.
But I want the full story.
You'll get it, she said.
All of it. And for the first time in years, she meant it. Preston stood in the center of the grand sunroom, still trying to process the reality that the woman he'd met in a crowded clinic now stood barefoot on the marble floor of a mansion, her mansion with sunlight pooling around her like it belonged to her. So, he said, glancing around at the ornate crown molding and the antique fireplace that looked like it hadn't seen a flame in decades, what exactly do you need me to do here? Talia stepped closer, her arms folded loosely across her chest. This house has been in my family since I was a child. After my father passed, I couldn't bring myself to change anything.
But now,
it feels stuck, like it's waiting for something, or someone. Preston raised an eyebrow. You want me to fix the house because it's waiting for someone? I want you to help me bring it back to life, she said. This place used to feel like home. Now, it just feels heavy. He ran a hand along the edge of a wooden built-in shelf. The grain was beautiful, but the finish was faded and chipped. It's got good bones. Just needs care. I know, she said, watching him closely. And I trust your hands more than any contractor I've worked with. He hesitated. You've barely seen what I can do. I've seen enough. A pause stretched between them, the kind that made the air thick with the weight of everything unspoken. I'll need tools, he said finally.
And time.
And someone to watch Nolan during the day. She nodded. I can arrange both. He turned to face her. I don't want charity. It's not charity, she said. It's a job. A real one.
With pay.
And a contract. Preston narrowed his eyes. You already had this planned. I had the hope, she admitted. But I didn't know if you'd say yes. He looked around again, then back at her. All right. I'm in. But I want to work room by room, not all at once. And I pick the order.
Deal.
They shook on it, no pretense, just the firm grip of mutual respect. Then, as if the moment had shaken something loose in her shoulders, she relaxed. I want to show you something, she said, motioning toward the staircase. He followed her up the wide steps, passing portraits with oil-painted gazes that seemed to follow them. At the end of the hall, she opened a door to a room filled with dust-covered canvases and tall windows with sheer curtains that billowed slightly despite the closed glass. My mother painted, she said softly. She left when I was young, but this room was hers. Preston stepped inside, careful not to touch anything yet. You kept it just like this? I couldn't bear to clear it out. He walked slowly through the room, pausing in front of one canvas that showed a vibrant street scene, full of color and motion. She was talented. She was troubled, Talia said, her voice quieter now. But yes, she saw the world differently. Preston turned to her. Is that why you never changed the house? Because of her? Talia nodded slowly. And because I didn't know who I was without all this history clinging to me. Until recently. He let the words settle before speaking. You don't seem like someone who's lost. She let out a laugh, this one smaller, more self-aware. Because I've spent years pretending I wasn't. He watched her for a beat. You don't have to pretend with me. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a quiet recognition. It didn't feel like a flirtation or a game. It felt like a thread pulling tighter between them. I should get started, he said, stepping back. Maybe the library first. That room could use some warmth. Talia smiled. I'll have everything you need delivered by tomorrow morning. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Preston. He stopped in the doorway. Would you stay for lunch? He glanced at the tall windows, then back at her. I should check in on Nolan. You could bring him, she said quickly. There's a garden. And a swing. He hesitated. You sure? I'd like to meet him properly. He looked at her for a long second, then nodded.
All right.
We'll come back at noon. When he returned a few hours later with Nolan's small hand tucked into his, the boy's eyes lit up at the sight of the sprawling lawn and the stone lions guarding the entrance. Do they bite? Nolan asked, pointing at them. Only on Tuesdays, Talia teased, crouching down to his level. But you're safe today. Nolan giggled, already charmed. Lunch was set on a long table beneath a vine-covered pergola in the garden. There were fresh-cut flowers in a vase, and a spread that made Preston blink grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, tiny rolls that melted in your mouth. This is fancy, he said, pulling out a chair for Nolan. It's Thursday, Talia said with a shrug. Why not? Nolan dug in without hesitation, and Preston watched him for a moment before turning to her. You didn't grow up here, did you? She sliced into her chicken. Not entirely. My father bought this house when I was 12. Before that, we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment over a bakery. Preston blinked. Seriously? Seriously. I used to fall asleep to the smell of croissants. He leaned back in his chair. And now you run. What exactly? She hesitated. A holdings firm. Real estate, tech, sustainability ventures. I inherited the company when my father passed. That sounds huge. It is. And exhausting. That's why I needed the clinic last week. I'd been running on fumes. He nodded slowly. And now, she said, looking over at Nolan, I'm remembering what matters. The boy had climbed down from his chair and was now chasing butterflies near the hedge. Talia watched him with a wistful expression. He has your eyes, she said. He has his mom's stubborn streak, Preston replied with a chuckle. Do you miss her? She asked, her voice gentle. He didn't flinch.
No.
I miss the idea of her. But the reality. That was something else. She nodded, not pressing further. After lunch, Nolan found the swing beneath an old oak tree, and Talia pushed him gently while Preston gathered the dishes. You don't have to do that, she called out. I know, he said. But I want to. Later, as the afternoon slipped into early evening, Preston glanced at his watch. We should head back. Talia walked them to the car, her hand brushing his as she opened the door. Thank you for today, she said. He met her gaze. Feels like my world's expanding faster than I can keep up with. Maybe it's not expanding, she said softly. Maybe it's just shifting. As the car pulled away, Nolan leaned against his father's side, already drowsy. Daddy, he murmured, can we come back tomorrow? Preston looked out the window, back at the mansion getting smaller behind them. Yeah, buddy, he said. I think we will. Preston stepped onto the polished stone floor of Talia's foyer early the next morning, tool bag over one shoulder and Nolan's hand in his. The air smelled faintly of orange blossoms and warm bread, a scent that belonged nowhere near a construction site, but it didn't bother him. Talia appeared from a side hallway, barefoot in dark trousers and a soft cream blouse, sleeves rolled to her elbows. A thin sketch pad was tucked beneath her arm. You're early, she said, her eyes flicking to Nolan, who clutched a juice box and blinked at the towering ceilings above them. We caught the train before sunrise, Preston said. Didn't want to be late. You'll never have to take the train again, Preston. She said it simply, as if it were a fact. I've added your name to the staff car list. You can be picked up and dropped off whenever you need. He looked at her, then down at Nolan. I don't want to owe you. You don't, she said. You're working. This is part of the arrangement. Nolan tugged on his sleeve. Can I go to the garden? Preston crouched. Only if you stay where the housekeeper can see you. Remember what we talked about? Yes, Nolan said, already bouncing on his heels. I stay in the backyard and ask before I go anywhere. Talia reached for a small walkie-talkie on the nearby console and handed it to him. Angela's already outside. She'll show you the fish pond today. Preston watched Nolan dart off with his usual energy. You have a pond?
And turtles, she said.
And a lemon tree that refuses to die no matter how badly I ignore it. He followed her through the hall toward the library, where sunlight spilled across the floor in thin golden lines. His toolkit landed beside the fireplace with a soft thud. You still want to start here? He asked, already rolling up his sleeves. She nodded. I think it's the heart of the house. If we can make this room feel alive again, the rest will follow. He scanned the room. You ever considered turning this into a music space? All this it'd sound incredible with a piano. She tilted her head. My father played. He taught himself when I was little. I haven't touched the keys since he died. Then it's time, Preston said, gripping the edge of a leaning bookshelf. You can't let the good things stay buried just because they hurt. She didn't respond right away. What about you? What's the thing you've buried? He paused, eyes still on the shelf. I used to draw. Not houses, people. Faces. But after Nolan came along, I didn't have the time. Or the quiet. You could pick it up again. He looked at her.
Could.
But I'd rather build something real. She moved closer, lowering her voice. You are. He worked steadily through the morning, pulling apart warped paneling and uncovering a hidden alcove behind one of the shelves. Inside was a dusty collection of books and a framed photo of a younger Talia, all braces and wild curls, leaning against a tall man in a baseball cap. Preston handed her the photo. Your dad? She nodded, smiling faintly. He used to read to me in this room. Sat right there, in that chair with stuffing coming out of the arm. He set the photo gently on the mantel. He'd like what you're doing. I hope so. By late afternoon, the room looked different. Not finished, but better. The layers were coming off both of the house and of her. She brought him cold lemonade while he packed up his tools. Did I tell you I sold my company? He blinked. What? She leaned against the frame of the now exposed window. Yesterday. Final paperwork came through this morning. You sold a billion-dollar company over the weekend? Technically, it was a multi-billion-dollar company, she said. But yes, I'm done. Why? She hesitated. Because I was running someone else's race. My father built it and I kept it moving. But it was never mine, not really. What now? I want to build something new. Something that's mine from the ground up. He crossed his arms. So, what, you're retiring at 30? I'm starting over at 31, she said. And I'd like you to be part of that. He gave her a wary look. Doing what? Rebuilding all your properties. She stepped closer.
No.
Building a life. With me. The silence that followed wasn't awkward or uncertain. It was full of meaning, of decisions not yet spoken but already forming. You're serious, he said. I've never been more. I've got a kid. A full-time one. I don't go to black tie fundraisers or ski in Switzerland. I don't want Switzerland, she said, her tone firm. I want your son's drawings on the fridge. I want sawdust in the hallway and pancakes on the stove. I want you. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out a breath. I'm not used to this. To what? Being wanted for the parts of me that aren't polished. She reached for his hand. You're exactly what I want. All of it. Angela appeared in the doorway with Nolan, who was barefoot and holding a lemon the size of a softball. Look, the boy beamed. It fell from the tree. Talia knelt. Then it's ours now. Preston looked between them, something shifting in his chest. I've been thinking, he said quietly.
About the job. About you.
About what's next. She straightened. And I'm in, not just for the house. For everything. Her eyes lit up, and when she stepped forward, he met her halfway. Their kiss wasn't rushed or uncertain, it was the kind that felt like closing a book and opening a new one all at once. Nolan made a sound between a gasp and a giggle.
You.
Preston grinned against her lips. He's going to need time. I've got time, she said, wrapping her hand around his. A week later, the library was transformed. A baby grand piano now sat beneath the window, the wood carefully restored by Preston's hands. The room smelled of lemon oil and fresh paint. They hosted a small gathering, just Angela, a few of Talia's oldest friends, and the neighbor who'd watched Nolan all those weeks. It wasn't a gala. It wasn't champagne towers and orchestras. It was laughter, warmth, and slow dancing in socks on polished wood. Later that night, Nolan fell asleep on a couch cushion with a book half open on his chest. Talia leaned into Preston's side. This house finally feels like home. He kissed the top of her head. That's because it is. And for the first time in years, both of them believed it.
Completely.
The scent of fresh plaster and lemon polish lingered in the air as Preston adjusted the final panel in the West Wing hallway. The house was no longer a museum of grief or frozen memories. It pulsed now warm, lived in, alive. Sunlight poured through the restored stained glass skylight above him, casting soft color across his forearms as he tightened the last screw. Talia's footsteps echoed lightly down the corridor. She wore jeans and a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, a streak of pain on her wrist. She stopped just behind him, watching in silence as he stepped back to inspect the wall with the kind of quiet pride he rarely allowed himself to show. "You finished," she said, her voice hushed. "Just did." He turned to face her. That was the last one. Her gaze lingered on his face. "This place doesn't feel like it's waiting anymore." "No," he said, brushing off his hands. "It's finally breathing again." She reached for his hand, their fingers locking without hesitation. "I was thinking, we haven't taken a single day off in weeks. What if we left? Just for the weekend?" He arched a brow. "Left? Like, left the city?" She nodded. "I have a cabin in the Catskills. It's nothing extravagant. Just quiet. Secluded. Beautiful." "Who watches Nolan?" Angela already offered. "He adores her." And she stocked the house with every dinosaur-themed snack under the sun. He hesitated for half a beat, then nodded. "All right, let's go." The cabin sat nestled on a ridge surrounded by tall pines and whispering wind. The drive was long, winding, and silent in a way that made Preston feel like the world had slowed down just enough for them to catch their breath. When they arrived, he stepped out of the car and looked around. "You weren't joking. This is completely different." Talia smiled, unlocking the front door. "It's where I come when I need to forget the rest of the world exists." Inside, the wood-paneled walls glowed amber in the late afternoon light. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and wide windows opened onto the forest beyond. She took his hand and led him to the back deck, where two chairs faced the mountains. "I used to sit here and wonder what it would feel like to have someone beside me who wanted the same kind of quiet." "Funny," he said, settling into the seat. "I used to sit on my fire escape at night and wonder what it would feel like to stop surviving long enough to just live." They sat in silence for a while, watching the trees sway. Eventually, she broke the quiet. "My father proposed to my mother on this deck." Preston turned, surprised. They were good together, until they weren't. "But that day?" She said yes, without even letting him finish the question. He looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "If I asked you, would you interrupt me too?" Her breath caught. "Try me." He stood slowly, pulling a small velvet box from his coat pocket. "It's not flashy." "I didn't want flashy. I wanted something that felt like us." She opened it gently. Inside was a simple gold band set with a single sapphire. Elegant. Understated.
Strong.
"Talia Brooks," he began, "you changed everything I thought I knew about love, about trust, about building a life that's not just about holding things together, but making them better. You walked into a clinic where I was running on fumes, and somehow you saw every part of me without flinching. I want to build the rest of my life with you. Marry me." She didn't let him finish the breath after me. "Yes," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck.
Yes.
"I've been waiting for you longer than I even knew." They kissed with the trees swaying around them and the wind soft against their skin. The wedding was held 4 months later in the garden behind the estate, beneath the tree where Nolan had once found a lemon the size of his head. Preston stood at the altar in a navy suit, his son beside him in matching suspenders, grinning like he'd just been handed a lifetime supply of jelly beans. Talia walked down the aisle barefoot, her dress simple and flowing, a single sapphire at her throat. She carried no bouquet, just a ribbon Nolan had tied for her that morning. Angela officiated, her voice steady and kind. There were no choreographed dances or flash mobs. Just promises, spoken plainly and clearly, and the soft sound of wind moving through the hedges. "I vow to show up," Talia said, her voice catching. "Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I vow to love you in the quiet, in the mess, in the rebuilding. Because you are my home." Preston took her hands. "I vow to never stop choosing you. To build not just houses, but moments. To be a father not just to Nolan, but to the life we're making together." Afterward, they danced barefoot on the grass while Nolan chased Bubbles with a neighbor's dog. They toasted with lemonade and laughed until the stars came out. That night, as they lay in bed with the windows open and the sounds of the garden drifting in, Preston traced his fingers along her spine. "You really sold your empire for all this?" he asked softly. "No," she said, pressing her palm over his heart. "I traded it for something better." "And what's that?" "You." Years passed, but the house never lost its warmth. Nolan grew, his drawings filling the hallway wall until they had to rotate them seasonally. The library became their evening sanctuary: books, music, and soft light. Preston's sketches returned, filling notebooks that Talia kept tucked in her nightstand. She built a new company not for power, but for impact. One project at a time. And Preston designed homes with soul, restoring more than walls. They traveled, but always came home. And every Sunday morning, no matter what, they sat at the kitchen island, Talia with her tea, Preston with his coffee, Nolan with his comic books and cereal, and planned their week like it was a shared adventure. There were no more secrets, no more waiting, only love, and a life they built together.